All right, good evening, everyone. Thanks very much for coming out to join us tonight, and thanks for everybody who's watching at home via YouTube. I'm May. I'm going to be sort of moderating and helping ask questions and handling the tech side of things tonight. And I'd like to introduce our speaker, Barb Thamudo. Barb is the Assistant Facilities Director and the Art Department Director here at the Capitol. So she kind of manages the care of all of the 9 acres of decorative artwork we've got in the building. She's also the mastermind behind the annual flower bed designs and the Christmas ornaments. So you might know her from there. Her designs might be on your Christmas tree. Barb lives in Fowlerville with her family, and when she is not here at the Capitol, she is managing a historic chapel turned event space and restoring her 1870s home. So I guess preservation is a lifestyle. So if you enjoyed tonight's program, join us again next month on April 9th, here again at 7 p.m. My coworker, Brian Page, he's our registrar. We're going to be talking about early technologies at the Michigan Capitol. So it'll be kind of interesting topics there. All right, so I'm going to hand things over to Barb to get started. I hope we enjoy the program.
Thank you all for coming out this evening. So yes, this is my 20th year with the state capitol. I spent my first 10 years here with the tour service. And in 2014, I came downstairs to facilities office, and it was right at the same time we started construction projects at the Capitol, major construction. And so the timing was just right, and I've spent, I don't know, countless meetings and construction meetings, weekly meetings that just go on for these big projects we've done around the Capitol. Who's been to the building before? I'm assuming you've all been in the Capitol. You're all familiar with the rotunda and the dome. Okay, perfect. So you know then that we have a lot of scaffolding out there that went up last summer. And basically, I'm going to walk you through as if you were up there yourself, seeing what's been going on for the last several months. So we're just going to dive right in. This project was particularly special for me because it is with the decorative paint. That's kind of my specialty. And so I've been up there on a regular basis, at least once a week throughout the project, just kind of keeping an eye on things. And so we're just going to start by looking at the slides here. Scaffolding, we have a lot of it. It's actually the same company who did our scaffolding 30 years ago when the Capitol was restored. And everybody has said that it's the best scaffold they've ever been on. You really can't even tell when you're up there that you are on a scaffold. There's very little movement to it, which makes it much easier to work on. Took 4 weeks to construct the scaffold in place. There's 10,000 individual pieces of scaffolding for this project, and it weighs about 70 tons. So all of that is sitting on top of the glass rotunda floor, 976 squares of glass, and then there's a support system built under that on the ground floor, as well as our sub-basement that is going to support all of that weight. That scaffold stretches from the ground floor all the way up to the oculus where the stars are painted, and that's 160 feet of space. So there's a lot of scaffold and a lot of climbing to do. So these slides are just kind of showing the progression of the scaffold as it's going up through the building. We're actually just coming up to the 4th floor, just under the allegories at this level. And now we have got the scaffold all the way up to the oculus at this point. So it took, as I said, 4 weeks for that process to take place. They did an excellent job. They kept the building in great shape. We had no accidents. We felt so good about the construction of the scaffold. Actually, the 14 governor's portraits stayed in place the entire time. That's how well they did this job for us. So there's a central staircase that you can see running through the center. There's 223 steps if you were to start at the 1st floor of the scaffold and climb all the way through the center to the very top. I don't do that on a weekly basis. I actually take a shortcut, which I'll tell you about in a bit. This is a view looking up through the scaffold. It's actually the track on the side of the staircase that you are seeing, which is a bucket hoist, which can haul materials, paints, and whatnot up all the way so that you're not having to climb and try and carry it at the same time. So it's very helpful, but does not take any people, so just materials. So you still have to do the climbing. Now we have our first look with our experts up here. This was late in the summer. It was August. Once the scaffold was complete, we were able to safely get on it and really have a first look for the first time since the building was restored in 1989 to 92. So it's been over 30 years since the Capitol had any work done in these spaces. And so what do you think we're going to find after 30 years of time? We had maintenance issues. We had a lot of dust. That was the big thing, a lot of dirt. Some of the areas had damage to the paint. Other areas were perfectly fine because they'd never get touched. And it depended on the angle that they were sitting, whether dust was going to settle on them or not. So we found a lot of different types of conditions once we got up. And now you're going to see some slides that show some of those conditions. Because everything in the Capitol is constructed with cast iron, sheet metal, and tin, that's essentially what the entire dome is made of, you're going to see a lot of what I call popping. And so what we have are these releases of paint from that tin surface or that sheet metal surface. And so if you were to start picking at that, it's going to start spreading further and further. And the reason we get these is because either it's been bumped and it has some flexibility, so it pops that paint off if it's dented. Also, temperature fluctuation. There's no insulation in our dome, and we had really severe variance in temperatures. So very cold in the winter, very hot in the summer, and that was also creating some of the issues with the paint. Here you can see actually a piece that was lifted on the left. And then you can also see over here, sorry, if I'm using the pointer, it's going to be on this side right here. If you look over to this side, this is a past campaign, and what happened is that the loose paint was removed, and it was just painted, surface painted. There was no fill added to that, and that's something that we needed to discuss for the current project, and I'll talk more about that as well. Here's another example of those areas of loss you have here. Up in the dome. This is right in between our allegories. Here's some more examples of accessible areas that had been touched up over the years, but a little poorly. Just like one quick coat of paint disappear, but not a great job. And now we have a really close-up look. I want you to look very closely at the ledge that Erica is leaning against, and you'll see how much dirt is sitting there. And if you look behind her on the other ledges, you're going to see the same thing. So very thick layer of dust and dirt. Erica has a scope out, and she's actually doing an analysis of the paint. So just trying to see how many layers of paint might be there. Here she's doing a little sample piece, so she's just taking a tiny scalpel, and she'll scrape away some of those layers so that they could look at it under a microscope. When we were up on the scaffold, one of the first things we noticed is in our giant blue panels, there was a tiny hole, and actually it's being pointed at in this view here. This tiny hole is actually on the seam of two pieces of sheet metal that are coming together. It's on the south side of the building, and so it was having a beam of light shine right through it. That's how we ended up seeing it, because it's really only the tiny size of my fingertip, but this beam of light was shooting through it, and that's how we discovered it. So we had a lot of conversations about the tiny hole, and it kind of became a little bit of a joke for a bit on our weekly meetings. We needed to figure out if we could have accessibility to it, because it's on the inner dome. And if you know about the construction of the Capitol, we have an inner dome and an outer dome capped over the top of it. So essentially, our domes are like nesting eggs, one stacked over the other. you had to climb between the two walls in order to get to this space. If that had been on any other side of the dome, we wouldn't have been able to get to it, but it just so happened that it was at the staircase level where we come up between the walls to climb up into the dome. So we were able to fill and repair that tiny hole there. In order to get there, if you didn't have the scaffold, you'll notice this panel on the wall. This panel is actually what we call a guillotine door, and it would slide up from the floor into the wall, and it would expose a staircase that you'll see here next. And so this is Kevin, and he's with BCA, and he's one of our conservators that was working on the project. He's going to go up and he's going to inspect this hole, and so he'll climb the ladder between the two walls to get where he is in this next photo that you see. And this is right about where that hole was, so we had that ability to repair it. This is a staircase. So if you were to go into the dome today, you would go up to the 5th level above the 4th floor. You would go through the guillotine door up a ladder that then turns into the staircase that you see here, and you would ascend up to where the stars are, where that's what we call the oculus level. From there is a spiral staircase that takes you to the lantern, the lookout at the very top of the Capitol building that you see from the outside. So there's a lot involved in climbing into the dome. Here's another view of what that staircase would look like if you were to do that. And then you're also seeing the inner dome lining there. That curved sheet metal is actually the inner dome. So now that we've gotten up on the scaffold, the very first thing that's going to happen is they're going to start scraping all of the loose paint, okay? So this happened very quickly. Within a week, all of the scraping was done. So by the time I had gone up again, it was a little shocking to see what had happened, a little frightening. The next picture will show that even better. So this is what it looks like in between the ribs. It's what we call the ribs of the dome. They're in between the ladies that are painted, the muses or allegories. So this is the condition, and now we have to decide, because so much paint was removed, are we going to fill that space or are we just going to paint over it? And that was a tough call, because you're making decisions that if they fail and the scaffold comes down, it's going to be another 30 years before anyone's able to go back up and fix it. Scaffolding is very expensive. It was 1/3 of the cost of the project. And so this is kind of a one-shot deal. And it was a little nerve-wracking to try and figure out what would be the best approach here. Our concern was if we just painted over it, because this is such a highly visible area in the dome, that you would see the difference and you would know that that damage had happened. So we did something with the repair, and I don't know if anybody's heard of Bondo, but it's actually used in auto body restoration. And my father, growing up, restored classic cars, so I was very familiar with it myself. It is used to fix metal on cars, to fix dents. And so this seemed like an appropriate solution. And that's how they ended up filling these voids. We did have to make decisions on the amount of fill we were going to do, because we could have spent months filling holes and dents. So we had to come up with a determination. If it was a larger than 3-inch space, we're going to fill it. If it's smaller than that, we're going to leave it alone and just in-paint it. So here you see the process starting to take place with those repairs. Here's the actual Bondo being spread on. Kind of looks like a drywall compound, but it's much heavier and it dries very quick and very hard. So you have to work fast with it. And here's another closer view of that. And just below that, you'll notice a little area that wasn't filled. So it is helping with the situation. It's going to fill that so you don't have that edge of the scraped paint exposed. There's the one done, and then here we go. Now our next step, now that we've got everything scraped, it actually comes down to the cleaning and the color matching. Now, the cleaning isn't very fun to see, but basically everything had to be dry, dusted down, so kind of took the heavy dirt, removed it just with sweeping, vacuuming. Then after that was all done, they went through and did a wet clean, which meant they took water, soapy water, and wiped everything down. In some cases, that actually was enough to fix some of the issues because of our condensation issues that we had in the dome. We had a lot of dirty streaking where there were gaps between where the sheet metal met. And so in some of the panels, we had just a lot of dirty streaks running down the wall. And that washed right off, and it made it quite easy. Color matching is quite a process. There's a lot of colors in the Capitol. I'm sure you've noticed that. So they had Canning & Company as our contractor. They did work here during the restoration. They're one of the few decorative paint firms in the country. They came onto the project. They sent one of their best color matchers out, and here she's mixing colors to just find that right combination for all of the, I believe there was, I'm not going to remember this correctly, there was probably 30 different colors right around there that they had to come up with. Here she is mixing, using a hairdryer to dry her samples. Once they had the colors and we approved the colors for the match, the stencil work began. I actually brought some of the stencils that were just used, and they're up here on the table. If after the talk you want to look at those, you're welcome to. Stencil work, it started with a tracing, if you have something to trace, which we did. So they traced here with a thin paper, outlined the pattern, and then they could take that and create a stencil on a thin plastic, which is really, depending on the size, you could actually make some, we do those in-house. We have our two artists here that can create a stencil with a silhouette machine or a Cricut machine, even if it's a small enough pattern. If it's a wider pattern, we have a slightly bigger machine that can handle that. If it's too large, then we would have to send it out. But all of those stencils were recreated. And then they had to do the placement after we had everything painted with a base coat. So we've got Christine here probably laying in one of the most difficult areas to paint. She has to kind of get down on her back in order to reach this curved area, and she's lining up her stencil. The stencils, after they're cut and they're ready to be placed, are sprayed with a light adhesive so they can stick to the surface. Nothing heavy, it doesn't do any damage, but it holds it just long enough for them to add the paint to that. Here you can see a little more of the alignment process. And now they're rolling the color on. Once the color was rolled on, they then outlined it. The outline is done in a dark color, and that's just going to make it pop up on that surface when you see it. It's going to be easier to see with the two-tone color. So a darker brown is stenciled, but then you'll see there's connection lines. So you have to go back over it. Once you peel that stencil off, you're now going to have to hand brush in your lines to connect that. So that gets a little labor intensive, but that is the finishing touch on those to make those really crisp. Here's an example of some of our befores and afters from the project. So our earlier slide, you can see what it looks like below after it's been repaired. And the same with the fifth level pilaster on the wall in the next picture. When you have scaffold in place, it wasn't just about cleaning and doing the decorative paint. It was actually about making those improvements so that we wouldn't hopefully have as much damage in the future. So one of the things that we did was we added window film, window tint, which was going to help with the UV. That's going to protect some of the decorative surfaces and also protect the allegories the ladies painted up there on canvas. So that's an added measure that we have. We also, this is just a couple pictures of the process of them putting that on the glass. We also added monitors that are going to monitor so we can look right on our phone and see what the humidity temperature is up there, the heat temperature, whether we need to adjust anything. So those sensors are in place. We also took the opportunity to update the fire suppression system, so that is a dry system as well now. So those are all improvements that are going to help this project last hopefully longer than the 35 years that it was since the last one. I thought this was a really cool shot from the angle. You can see the Corinthian column out the window on the exterior of the dome. And this brings us to one of our favorite parts of the projects, of course, and that's working on the allegories or muses. So the ladies in the dome, they're called allegories. Some people call them muses, but they're symbols of things important to the state when we did the construction of the building. And if you've been here, you're pretty familiar with them. But they represent art, agriculture, law, science, justice, industry, commerce, and education. And this is another one of my favorite shots because this is shipping or commerce, and it's our conservator's hand below, the allegory's hand above. So she's doing a cleaning here. And there you can see Tommaso Uglaris' signature in this. Of the 8 allegories, there are 6 that have his signature. This is a classic Tommaso signature. It's a J for his first name and a T for his last name. Tommaso was an Italian immigrant. He came from Boston. Well, he came from Italy, but he was living in Boston. He was commissioned to do these pieces for us, but he never came here physically on site. So somebody had to give him the measurements, and then he painted them in his studio. And once they were completed, they were shipped back to us. We climbed up what I would presume was a wooden scaffold and glued them into the curve of the dome. That was quite a task, and also something that I think is kind of fun to see. Meg, could we pop the light down? I think it might be easier to see some of these with the light down a little bit further. Thank you, May. So this is one of our conservators working on industry, actually. She's cleaning it. Thank you. And that's the first process of our work, the conservation work with the ladies. We were really happy when we got up there to see that they were in good condition. We didn't have to do any major work to them, so the first step in the work with these was to clean it, and then they consolidated any loose or flaking paint, so they would just inject an adhesive that they could then press gently the loose pieces down, and that would adhere it back to the canvas. Here's a next step, which is actually a varnish coat. So the entire canvas is varnished. The varnish is going to saturate into the canvas, and it actually immediately made the colors more vibrant, and it brought those canvases to life. It also was helpful because it's now showing the artist what they have to match accurately when they go to in-paint. So if there were any losses of paint, those are going to be touched up with a brush, just a very, very small brush with a few bristles, and then they would add the color back in. So there were areas that needed that type of work. Corinne's doing some cleaning here, but this gives you an idea of the scope of the space. So she's just working on one, and you can see the shift around the side. You see 2 other allegories in the background. This is a piece that I think is interesting. I'd like to talk about for a minute because there's details here that obviously you're never going to see from the glass floor. So remember that I said Tommaso Uglaris did this in studio. So what you have is this crease in the canvas right here, and this is where the canvas was actually stretched over the wood stretcher in a studio. And it's a little harder to see, but right here are the tack holes for where he attached it to his stretcher, running down right here. And then when they came here to Lansing to be put back to be attached to the dome, you have another line of tacks. and this is how they place them. So the canvas would have been coated with a white lead paste. It was also applied to the wall of the dome. This is going to give you some shifting, a little bit of ability. It's like if you've wallpapered, it's very similar. So you have a little bit of movement in order to get those right where you need them, to line them up perfectly. And then the tacks are put just in to hold that until the adhesive cured. But the tacks remained, and they are part of the story now, but they aren't actually holding them up. In fact, that adhesive, over 150 years old, it's still holding like unbelievable. They didn't even have to do any reattachment of the canvas. It's how secure it is. So that was great to find out. So part of the process of this job was to research. And because I came from tours and a history background, I love to dig and do research in newspapers. So the tour service had actually found the article on the left just as we started the project from 1956. But as I was doing some research, I found the article on the, on the right. I found the article on the left, and that's from 1930. And it very clearly says, Capitol Dome cleaned for the first time since 1876. So this was really an important piece of information for the last part of the project that we'll talk about in a moment. Notice on the picture on the right, though, you see we've got a beam running across here. This was how they went up. They didn't have a full scaffold like we do today. So if you were doing the dome work in 1956, good luck. That was a little bit scary. I'm not sure. I'm sure they were hoisted, had a safety. I hope they did, but who knows? If you go to our next slide, this is standing right under the stars. This is one of my favorite parts of the project because as you're looking closely at each of these stars, I was noticing a darker royal blue that was peeking from the edges. Can you see that a little bit on some of those? There's just a really dark blue. I was really curious about it, and nobody was asking anything about it, which made me more curious. So about halfway through the project, I decided to ask our conservators if they could take this a step further and do some sampling, because when I see a dark blue behind the color that you see, it makes me think that perhaps the dome was painted a much darker color before. So what happened is we did a scraping. You can see here, and this was actually done with a scalpel. This is showing that we actually had an outline of dark blue around the stars, several, most of those being the gold stars. There's gold and silver stars in the oculus. And then if you look right here, that tiny little piece here is actually exposing the original color of the dome. So now this is telling a story that we had something totally different going on previously. Here's another example of a little more scraping. So we've gotten a little bit further with those exposures. And now we have to make a decision. Do we want to go to the original color that we suspect is the original color? Let me back up there. So this is what is saying is the original color. It is a little bit different from what was painted in the 1990s. And then you have this blue. Because of the articles that we found and the way that it was described in the paper, it leads me to believe that the stars were outlined in 1930 when it was first cleaned, because they specifically say they brightened up the stars and the dome. And so that's how we think this dark blue outline became part of the story, but it is not original to the dome. When we started the project, we thought we were only going to have to clean the surface and not have to do any paint work. The stars looked great. We would just have to do a varnish coat, because once we cleaned, there was a bit of a milky haze over the blue surface. And that was from the glaze that was used in the 1990s. Once they put the varnish sample up and I started to climb up the scaffold to check on it, I immediately knew varnish was not the way we were going to be able to go, because varnish is got a sheen, and that sheen is showing all of the imperfections that you have in the sheet metal. So it's all those tiny dents look like hail hit it. And so that was removed. And we talked further about what to do as far as the blue color. And because we have a great archive and great people on our staff, we had some photos of the 1991 restoration, which actually shows the stars with the dark blue outline. So 1991, they also determined that those were not original to the decorative scheme, and so they did not keep them. They covered those up with the color that we are used to seeing. So this also became a little bit of a debate, an internal debate with just a few staff people. So it was a pivotal moment for me, I feel, because if you've lived in Lansing your whole life, you're familiar with the fact that the dome used to be completely white at one time. And then when they restored the Capitol in 1989 to 92, we wanted to return it to the original color. It was not originally white. This was controversial. A lot of people were attached to the white dome. They grew up with the white dome, and they didn't want it to be the color of sandstone, like the base of the Capitol. And so there was a compromise that was reached, and they found a color in between the white, not quite as dark as the sandstone, but it's not a bright white either. So that's how we did the dome on the exterior. So I'm kind of thinking, oh, is this going to be a moment where I make a decision to change the entire color of the Oculus? Because it was really kind of reflecting the 90s campaign was giving it more of a day blue, if you will, and those stars definitely tell you it's a night sky. And so we were feeling like maybe we wanted to push that color a little darker. But also, when you're restoring, the idea is you're trying to keep it as original as possible. The whole premise of restoration is to bring it back to the original. And so we put our personal preference aside. We had, this actually is the sample board up here of the original color that we were working with from the 90s, and then 3 other colors that we thought could work. We went with what we felt was the most accurate from the exposure that we showed you in the earlier slide. And so here on the right-hand side, Dave with Canning is now painting it. And this actually just happened last week. They just finished this over the weekend. So he painted around each one of those stars. You see him doing that now. Right behind his shoulder there, like next to his back, you see the square. That was our sample area, if you will. So I went up and I said, yes, that looks good. And so they went through and continued to paint the entire Oculus. And that was the end of my slides, but I am very happy to take any questions, or if you are curious about anything, I'd be happy to answer those. Thank you. Thanks. That went pretty quickly, didn't it? Yeah, they are two-toned. There is a lighter in the center and a darker gold on the exterior that kind of outlines it. So it does give it a more of a dimensional effect. I'm not sure if, when the scaffold comes down, I'm gonna have to look to see if I can see that two-tone. I think it's a little bit noticeable from the glass floor. And then silver leaf is what we say. Some say platinum. Still haven't solved that mystery. We did solve another mystery today, though. How many stars are in the dome officially? Brian stayed up to count today. 110. And he even broke down the count between the gold and the silver stars. I don't remember what it was, but we have it on record. They are not in an astrological pattern. They are randomly placed, and only one of the stars had any work done on it on this project. So there's one star that had a tiny surface hole, and we filled it, and that one star was relieved in gold. I'm also interested to see if I can pick it out once the scaffold comes down. Mm-hmm. Yes. No. So the Oculus, it's really interesting. It's like I would describe it as a giant cereal bowl just suspended upside down over uh, what you see. It's just hanging there, suspended by wire. And you can see each of the seams of where the sheet metal joined together, all of those seams that come around. And it would, because of the way that it's suspended, it would be too hard to work on it. And honestly, nobody can tell from the lower levels that those are there. Especially now, I should mention, we did not put any varnish on. We used a matte paint, so there's no sheen. And one of the benefits we're hoping from going with this matte paint is that most of the photos you see of the Oculus have a halo effect, kind of a, because of the lighting, there's a sheen, like a halo, a silver halo, if you will, that you see in almost all of the photos, unless somebody goes in and edits it. And so I'm hoping that this actually will eliminate that from happening. Yeah. If you're a crafter, so our artist in residence is going to hate that I said this, but he uses a silhouette machine, for the record. It's very similar. It's a little less crafty than the Cricut machine. But you can go to Joann's or um, Michael's and pick one of these up. It's women, men, people use it for crafting. It's how you make cards. It's a cutout. It's a laser, not a laser machine, but a cutting tool, and it runs through. It cuts, and it's amazing. It's all like a digital, and you send it through your program, and it'll crank it out the other end, and you've got your pattern. You do? Yeah, they're very nice. And what was nice is that the Silhouette just came out with a larger one, so you get a larger, I think 20 up to 24 inches now, and it used to just be like a 12 to 18 inch width. Yeah, yeah, you can. Here, let me get the. So this is a sample board that was done so we could bring it downstairs. Uh, this is the color that was from the '91 campaign. This is the color that we went with. And this is the two darker colors that we were debating on. We had ruled out uh, this color. We were thinking about this color. Um, Again, it seemed like a really huge decision, but I don't think anybody is going to notice it now that it's done. Um, it looks very nice. May just got a peek today, and it looks great. Um, but once the scaffold's down, I think in general most people won't notice that we've done anything with the color. This is true. Varnish can be removed. Varnish can be removed. Yep. Yeah, it saturates the canvas, but it can still be taken off. We actually did not remove the varnish coat from the allegories this time. It was found that it wasn't necessary. The varnish coat that was applied in the 1990s had held up and it hadn't yellowed, and so we just put another coat over it. But it can be removed. That varnish sample that I showed you on the Oculus was actually taken back off too. But that is, you're right. It's the key of the very key of conservation is don't do anything that can't be reversed. Yeah, so when it came up in conversation, Canning and Company, they work across the country and they've probably worked on virtually every state capitol, churches, all kinds of buildings such as ours, and they have used Bondo in other buildings, so they felt good about that decision. So thank goodness that wasn't my job. That's why we had BCA, Building Conservation Associates. They are doing all of the records. In fact, prior to starting this project, they had already been here to do an entire paint analysis of the whole building. And so we have a ton of documentation. And that was one of the big parts of this project for me as well, is because when I started here 20 years ago, it was just after the restoration had happened, and we do have a lot of records from that to refer to, a lot of photos, but it was done in a different way than we're doing today. It was done by different groups. So the Senate did some of the building, the House did some of the building, and there was 3 different entities making decisions about different areas, and we had multiple contractors here. It wasn't just one entity running the whole show. It made it much harder to do back then. And so we had the advantage of not having to do that. But it also makes our records a little more together and complete and easier to follow versus how one group did their records versus another group, you know. So I also, technology-wise, am curious as to how our records go, because while they had a lot of information, we had some, you know, we had specific colors. Color changes over time. It fades. Color matching is really difficult. And so even though we had what we call a Munsell code, a Munsell record for the colors that were used during the restoration, because we have 2 really good artists on our team, it was easier for them to just eye match the colors, because aside from matching color, which is difficult, the sheen is also very hard. Sheen makes a huge difference, and some colors in the building are notoriously difficult to do. Blues are one of the harder ones for them. And so this is how we've done it since then. We have a great digital record, but we also have a hard copy record. So no matter how things change, because in the 90s, a lot of these pictures were on slides. So maybe some of our photos, you know, will be different, you know, how we look at them in another 30 years, but we feel really confident in the records we're leaving for the next future project. And maybe it'll be 50 years instead of 35 years before we have to go up again. And when you think about it, the Capitol's over 150 years old, but this is only the 4th time we've gone up, as far as we know. So it's like going into space. Yes. Not up there. There's no fans, but they can make adjustments. And this is not, so the technical mechanical part is a separate presentation. That's for the director. That's his part of the tour. So I can't give you specifics. We don't have fans up there, but they can monitor, know if there's an issue. We have ways of control. It's like a giant chimney. An example of that is during the project when the painters were on the scaffold in January. It was very cold up there. We had some really cold days, and that sheet metal is freezing at that point. And so they're up there wearing, you know, sweaters and all bundled up trying to paint. But the other problem is it's not easy to paint when it's that cold. You can't. Every paint can says don't paint unless it's 50 degrees or more. So we weren't really crazy about having space heaters on the scaffold. So one of the things that they did is we opened the door at this level. There's a glass enclosure around this oculus, and that was done in the 90s to help with the temperature issues, the fluctuation. We opened the door on that, and immediately the warm air from the building started rising and going up, and pretty quickly we were able to make that space a little bit more comfortable for them to work in. Yes. No, no structural changes. Like I said, everything was in really good condition. So we didn't have to do any major repair work. Yeah, we were really fortunate. Oh, I had a shortcut I was going to explain. From the fourth floor, instead of climbing the whole center from the ground floor up, from the first floor up into the oculus, at the fourth floor, which most of us did that were working on the scaffold, we would just climb a short ladder that was attached to the side. It's got a construction wall around it that's locked, so we didn't have everybody in the building climbing up there. But that way you could just climb up a short ladder, get on at the fourth floor level, where most of the bulk of the work was between 4 and 5, and we're able to access the scaffold that way. As long as you can climb a ladder, it worked out pretty well. Nothing in stone, nothing in cast iron or sheet metal. I'll take this moment to go on the record. If you heard my Michigan radio interview, I had one little thing that I was not happy about, and I was talking about the decorative elements in the building, and I said it was all made out of tin. I think it came off as the Capitol, the whole dome was made of tin, and I thought everybody that heard it probably thought, why hasn't it just blown over? It's cast iron, sheet metal, and the ornamentation in a lot of the areas is tin. One of the pieces, I'm not sure if it shows in one of these photos, I like to describe as the giant bun cakes of the dome. May likes that too. She likes to bake. Let me see if I can find it. I'll go back. I'm not sure if I have the photo of my favorite bun cake pan, but there is another example. And actually, it's right here. So this here, this is the swag, and that is completely hollow. It is metal. So it's literally like a bun cake, bun cake pan. If you flipped it over, you could fill in your batter and put it in the oven. And so it's not that easy to see in this photo, but they use tin snips to go around the edge of the metal all along here, and that's how they attached it to the wall. But it's hollow, and if you went up there and you knocked on any of those surfaces, it would sound like tin. Yes, yeah. It's pretty incredible. I never get tired of course, looking at this building, but also just can't believe what they could do 150 years ago. And I know it's cliche and people say it all the time, but they just don't build buildings like this anymore. That's for sure. Yeah, that's a good question and something I should have started off with. So when I came down to facilities in 2014, our Capital Commission had just recently formed. So we operate under a 6-member commission today, 2 appointed from the executive branch, 2 from the House, and 2 from the Senate. Those 6 people on the commission appropriate money and give us the money for these projects. They oversee us, so they are who we answer to. And then we manage the building for them. When we started looking at what needed to be done around the Capitol, everybody immediately talked about the decorative paint. We have 9 acres of it. It's what we're known for. Our state capitol is unique because of the 9 acres of paint. So we had a lot of areas that were in poor condition. And I specifically remember walking with the newly formed commission, one of the lead commissioners, and he was real anxious to start, attacking a project. And they were looking at the painted surfaces, and I was showing them the areas of damage. But I said, I'm not sure what the point of repairing these areas are if we haven't addressed the issues that caused them in the first place. and that was a lot of ceilings that had mechanical things sitting on heating cooling units, mechanical units sitting on the roofs that had caused the problems, caused the leaks, whatnot. And so that is actually how these series of projects began. So we started right from the beginning. This actually is full circle at this point. So the exterior of the building was done. So they did roof work, they did the exterior of the dome, they cleaned the stone, they did all the mechanical and electrical upgrades. So everything was fixed or replaced. And that then brought us to the geothermal project. So that also is part, kind of like a add-on to our electrical and mechanical project. Then that then leads to what you're sitting in today with Heritage Hall. And then we actually were just able to get back to the decorative paint. So I feel like, yeah, after 10 years of construction, we are full circle at this point. Anybody else? Well, thank you again so much for coming. If you are up here, do stop up just to look at the stencils that I brought down from the scaffold. I have a very thin piece of the silver leaf from the stars that had fallen on the floor. So I picked it up, and it's like trying to catch a butterfly. It's so thin, it wants to float away, and it has a bit of a static cling to it, so it crumples very quickly and easily. So I snagged it and got it in a piece of Ziploc here. All right, thank you. Thanks again. You're welcome.